Oil prices are climbing again, with markets deeply unsettled about the US-Israeli war on Iran. The surge comes after US President Donald Trump said in an interview with the Financial Times that his preference would be to, quote, take the oil in Iran, and that he was considering US boots on the ground. And despite a strong showing on Monday morning, US trading has been mixed. The first March figures are now being reported showing the economic impact of the Iran war, and this has spooked many investors. Let's turn now to our very own Daniel Winter to hear more.
The oil price is spiking again. This time, traders are reacting to Donald Trump's explicit threat against Karg Island, which is Iran's main oil export hub. And that's on top of prices being already high because of the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, where 85% of the Gulf's oil export has to move through there in order to reach the wider world. And so that means that Brent, one measure of the price of oil, has pushed above $116, and that's a rise of 58% for March. And if that sustains, which at the moment seems likely, that will be the biggest price rise inside a single month on record.
Dr. Anna Mikulska is with me now. She is Senior Vice President at the CGCN Group, where she leads a research and intelligence unit on global energy markets, geopolitical risk, and regulatory strategy in Washington, D.C. Hi, Anna. Thanks for joining us. Brent oil has pushed above $116 a barrel. That's a 58% rise for March. For many people, that's a very abstract number. Can you give us a sense of what these prices actually mean, both for the markets and for the people?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it's very hard, right? Because we're not buying oil in barrels, going to the to the store or coming with our to the gas station with our car. But there is this rule of thumb, at least in the US, for example, but it can be helpful thinking about how a rise in oil prices can affect, for example, your prices of gasoline, is that every $10 of increase in oil prices will generate approximately 25 cents per gallon of gasoline in additional cost. So that could be a little bit helpful, probably more to the American audience. But if you think about it, that the gasoline here was, before the conflict around $250, $260, and now it's around $370, then you can kind of go back and think about okay, that's $40 more a barrel, $50 more a barrel. That goes, that generates approximately $125 or $150 per gallon. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of helpful. It's different for different countries, obviously, because different countries use different gasoline mixes. And because of that, those prices will be somewhat different. But it should help.
Sorry. Are these prices due to an actual shortage or just the market's reaction to an expected shortage?
So there is an actual shortage, right? We have less oil flowing from the Middle East because Strait of Hormuz is virtually blocked. There are some still tankers that can go through, but most of them are sitting in the Hormuz Strait, not able to cross and not able to basically provide both oil and petroleum products to their points of destination, which means there is less oil and petroleum product on the markets, and hence we see the rise in prices of Brent, also of WTI, but also in physical markets. So yes, there is a shortage. The question is how much this shortage was able to kind of, we had an overwhelming supply of oil. The prices of oil were very low. So in a way, some of that shortage has filled in the market needs for more demand and hence increase of production. But at this moment, the markets are responding to shortage.
Mm-hmm. Is there a way to tell how extensive the damage on oil and gas infrastructure is, not just in Iran, but also in other countries like Qatar?
So we know that there has been a damage, physical damage, particularly in Qatar, for example. Gas infrastructure has been damaged, and approximately 17% of supply of LNG that would have come out from Qatar from that infrastructure has been damaged, and we have heard already from Qatar that fixing it will take 3 to 5 years. So there is physical damage. This is extending into the long term. Opening the Strait of Hormuz and starting back production will not fix it immediately. So this moves us from the position where opening Strait of Hormuz will help immediately to, well, it will help, but some of the damage will sustain and will take longer for the damage to get repaired. Hence, the shortage will persist for longer time.
And what needs to happen to fix that long-term damage?
Well, the long-term damage, it's an infrastructure, so it will be fixed, right? It can be, it will be fixed by Qatar. As I said, 3 to 5 years. In addition, what we will see expansion of projects in other places. And part of it is also because the markets will react to the energy security implications of the current crisis, right? The markets will be thinking in a way to price in the current crisis. And because of this, other markets will potentially open. So we can think about other markets that do not have a strait that potentially, could impact the delivery of oil and gas from those areas. And here we can think of Canada, we can think of US, we can think of Latin American countries and Africa. So these markets in time might potentially open up and provide new supply sources, aside of the infrastructure being fixed by Qatar or by Saudi Arabia, and potentially also aside of new ways to insulate those countries from other incidents that could result in obstruction on the Strait of Hormuz. Mm-hmm. And here I'm thinking about potential new infrastructure buildup. So when you think about it, currently the Strait of Hormuz is so problematic because there's just no way around it, and or very few ways around it. Right? There are some pipelines that could bring some, for example, of oil that would go through Strait of Hormuz from Saudi Arabia away from the Strait of Hormuz. But that's not all. Everything cannot be sent that way. If, however, we had more of that infrastructure, then Strait of Hormuz would not be a binding constraint on the oil that Middle East can send, and in a way, it wouldn't be a target of Iran because there will be other places that oil and gas could go. So what we will probably see in the Middle East not only is building back the infrastructure that was damaged, but also building up infrastructure that can provide alternative routes away from Strait of Hormuz, and in that way, de-risk the region.
Mm-hmm. The oil prices also seem to bounce up and down by the minute, depending on what the US president says. Are there ways to make the oil markets more bulletproof in the future? Some of which you've already mentioned.
Right. So this is, yes. So part of it is diversification, right? Diversification of supply, diversification of supply routes, diversification of suppliers. And that will definitely be very helpful. And truly nothing is bulletproof, but that could help going forward and make it less variable. The prices less variable. Truly, what we have seen over the last 20 years, the development of American natural oil and gas has helped tremendously. If you thought just kind of this thought, if you think about the thought experiment about if there was no American oil and gas, if all of us, not only Asia or Europe or so, depended on so much more on the Middle East oil and gas, we would be in a much, much dire situation than we currently are.
What we're seeing now shows just how much the world is still dependent on fossil fuels. Should the governments interpret this as a sign to become less dependent, even if it's not for environmental reasons, perhaps for the stability of their economies?
I think it will depend on each government and on each country's natural resources. And I put it as natural resources, kind of taken broadly. So does this country have a lot of wind? Does this country have enough money to back up that wind with batteries, or solar, for example, batteries with additional peaking generation, or nuclear? Does it have money to provide nuclear power as a baseload generation? Right? Does the country have geothermal that can be the non-fossil fuel option, or does this country has a hydro? That can be that non-fossil fuel option. And then if the countries don't have that option, you still have to have reliable supply that's constant, that provides constant access to energy. We still haven't gotten to the point where only wind and solar can provide that. We still need to have a backup, right? So in order to do so, the countries will have to make sure that they will have access to variety of available options. And as I said, it can be that they might rely on gas, but they might rely on gas. First of all, they have to look how secure is this option? Where is it coming from? They have to diversify who's the supplier, diversify how that option is coming from. Is it coming via sea, via pipeline? And if not, then how can they diversify? How can they work with their storage, right? Can they provide storage options that can act as this buffer when issues like this arise and can help in a short term at the very least?
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Anna Mikulska from the CGCN Group.
Thank you.
How do the rising oil prices affect Germany and Europe? Let's listen in to what German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has to say.
Dieser Krieg betrifft uns alle. Er ist in unseren Alltag eingekehrt. Seit Wochen steigen die Benzinpreise, die Energiepreise in deutschen Haushalten und Unternehmen. Wächst sich dieser Krieg zu einem regionalen Großkonflikt heraus, dann kann er Deutschland und Europa noch stärker belasten, so stark wie wir es zuletzt in der Covid-Pandemie oder zu Beginn des Ukraine-Krieges erlebt haben.
Let's get more on this with Chris Southworth from the International Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom. Chris, thanks for joining us. Amid the Iran war, disruptions along the Strait of Hormuz and rising oil prices, you've spoken of a changing economic order. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, the world, the whole world is changing, no question whatsoever. We're seeing that friction everywhere. Definitely in the Middle East, but also in the World Trade Organization, where we've just come back today from the ministerial conference from Cameroon, and we've just seen exactly the same frictions that we're seeing everywhere else.
The OECD also predicts that of the G20 countries, the UK economy will be worse hit than many others. What makes the UK more vulnerable?
Because we're an international economy, very exposed to external shocks, and always have been. Let's be clear. We're an import-export economy, very internationally focused, with trade routes and trade corridors everywhere around the world. So anything going on elsewhere always impacts us more than everybody else. Mm-hmm. Everyone else.
Many Western economies have just gotten out of a high inflation period. Are you expecting them to slump right back into it?
Look, the number one priority across Europe is low growth. The UK is no different to that. anything that's going on internationally is going to impact us straight away. And the Iran conflict, as all conflicts or any disruptions externally, are impacting us enormously. It's driving up costs for average people, the man and woman on the street. Cost of living, whether it's fuel on the the petrol pumps or for food, it's having a huge impact.
Exactly. Like you said, countries everywhere are taking countermeasures to fight surging oil prices, from switching off streetlights, restricting AC usage, 4-day work weeks, restricted days to drive your car, to some more serious ones such as controlled blackouts and fuel rationing. Can these measures be effective?
Well, it depends on where you are. So for some parts of the world, like India or Malaysia, this is having a direct impact right now. Yeah, Malaysia, as I understand, is a 4-day working week. So it's having a direct impact immediately. For us, we're slightly more resilient, but it will have a direct impact in terms of cost for sure. But we've also got to think about things like fertilizers. That's a big dependency sector on oil and gas, or oil in particular. And, that's going to have a big impact on food next year. So we all need to be much more resilient than we are at the moment. And that's the big priority as far as I'm concerned, we're concerned. And, that's the priority we're pushing to government.
What do European nations need to do to be more resilient, to safeguard themselves, for instance, from future shocks like these?
Well, for Europe, I think that's a really interesting question. I think it's Europe, not just the EU. We need to work together much more than we've worked together perhaps over the last few decades. It's about all of us pulling together, making sure that our supply chains are connected, making sure that we've got the right structures in place to be more resilient, more agile, so that companies can move money and goods over the border quicker and faster. That's really, really important. Digitalization is a big part of this. And also put pressure on wherever we can politically to de-escalate conflicts that impact all of us.
If I can pick up on that and ask a pretty general question, what impact has the Iran war had on global trade deals?
It's huge. I mean, this is 20% of global oil. I mean, this is twice as big as any oil shock that we've ever seen before. It's enormous. It impacts all of us. So it's in all our interests that we put pressure on those who are in the conflict, in this case, the US, Iran, Israel, to de-escalate, open up that trade corridor in Hormuz. That will relieve some of the pressure, but it will take time. Even if we do that, it will take time for that to translate into practical benefits for business. But this is a conflict that we don't need right now. There's enough, conflicts and disruption going on in the global trading system. We don't need more.
Thank you. That's Chris Southworth of the UK's International Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for your insights.
My pleasure.
So then, what's about to unfold for energy markets? Is it more chaos to come? Let us know down below. Bye for now.